Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Merry Christmas. I'm glad to see you tonight. I was hoping you would be here. And now that I've seen you and we are together, my hope is moved. It's relocated from this space right here out there, somewhere in front of me, in front of us, which is where hope mostly resides in the future. Hope is like some magnetic force tugging us toward what life can be like, what it should be like, how God designed it to be. But sometimes, hope out there can land in the present moment. I have such vivid memories of sitting in a rocking chair 24 years ago in the middle of the night in our bungalow in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, patiently rocking our newborn daughter, Margaret. Now, I was there because she was crying and she was hungry and I had to get up and feed her, but at some point in the process, she would drift off inevitably into that stillness of a sleeping child. Any of you experienced that? I bet you have. For those of you that have, you know that there in your arms is hope realized. Hope for the future collapsed into the presence of an infant. It's no accident that the Christian narrative begins with the birth of a child. I suspect hope resides in infants so wonderfully because they have done nothing and can do nothing, and so for them, everything is possible. Their life is a straight highway into the future, only becoming twisted and curvy as they grow up and reveal who they are and what they're capable of doing and what they want to do, and what curves the world has set upon them, with the hills and the valleys they confront, with the rivers they have to forge and the mountains that they climb on this spiritual journey that is their life. And as they grow, hope moves into the future, becoming for them what it is for us now, aspirational, for life as it can be, as it should be, as God designed it to be. So tonight I want to talk about hope. I want to talk about how hope impacts us individually and as a community. How does that sound? Okay? You know, we're the Episcopal Church, so we can say amen. We can put our hand up just like this. Amen. Hope? Amen? All right, there we go. So I want to start with the assumption that we are not here accidentally. And I don't mean just tonight. I mean cosmically, we are not here accidentally. We are not a random swirl of stardust that just happened to configure itself into a conscious being. That's magical thinking, right? You're not an accident. You were created with intent, with purpose, providentially. Right, as a vessel into which hope is poured from the cauldron of courage. So I want to tie those two things together this evening. I want to tie together hope, you with me, and courage. Right? Because they're made for one another. They dance together. Hope is the inspiration, and courage is the action. All right? So since it's Christmas Eve, let's look at those things in the context of the birth story of Jesus. So it starts with Mary. She's pregnant. She's living with Joseph in Nazareth. And the way I like to tell this story is that this pregnancy that Mary has, this wasn't a secret. It was a celebration. People knew about it. If you want to hear my full rendition on this, go to our YouTube site. Type in, what do we have? Christmas Story, Part 1, Part 2, under Teachings and Talks. I'm not going to go there tonight, but I will touch on it a little bit more, because where the story leaves us is Joseph has been summoned to go to Bethlehem to pay a tax. And the safe and reasonable thing for Mary to do is to stay in Nazareth. Right? To give birth with the help of all those aunties that are floating around the village who know the ropes when it comes to birthing children. Instead, the 9-month pregnant Mary climbs onto a donkey for a 5-day journey, 95 miles to Bethlehem. Now that takes courage, right, Kim? You're right on. Right, but that's courage that was kindled in the cauldron of providence and insight, because Mary had had a visitation. We heard about it. She was inspired. And Joseph had a dream. He was supportive. And Mary was a scholar. Back to the class on YouTube. Mary was a scholar, right, who understood the prophecy of Micah, which said that the Messiah was to be born in Bethlehem. So she climbed on a donkey. Imagine the courage to tell the aunties she was going to Bethlehem. I can only imagine the protest. But Mary was in touch. She was in tune with the tug of hope upon her heart. Now, it's interesting to note the Latin word for heart is cor. Shares a common etymology with the word courage. So when our heart is tugged by hope, the response requires courage. They're made as allies, these two words: hope, inspiration, courage, action. So when hope in our lives gets a little bit fuzzy, courage is required. Needed to confront the bad thing, the tough thing, the painful thing, to do the hard thing that helps bring hope back into focus. Mary understood that. She understood. She had a sense. And her sense of courage allowed her to get on that donkey and go to Bethlehem. And her sense of courage is what then became the heart of the Christian faith. That we are a people of persistent hope, because we know with certainty that the bad thing is never the last thing. You see, hope came alive in the person of Jesus, not because of his significant life, though he had a significant life, but because of the resurrection from the dead. Now, resurrection is the inextinguishable hope that the bad thing is never the last thing. Resurrection illuminates the insight that God never leaves us, no matter the twists and turns, the hills or valleys, that God is there even after our final breath. And so we're people of courage, undaunted, fearless, even in the face of humanity's worst ideas. Humanity built the cross. God's response was resurrection. We are people of hope who act in the world with courage. You with me? A little bit, does that sound okay? Okay. Let me give you an example of what this might look like. There was a story told to me by a friend who recently, was something he had seen in a documentary, and it struck me, so I want to share it with you. It's a story about a young man, a long time ago, was captured in Italy during World War II. And at the time, the Allies and the Axis powers were deep in battle, and at that moment in time, it was uncertain what the outcome of the war was going to be. This young man was captured by Mussolini's army, and he was marched through a small town on his way to a POW camp. It was a monochromatic scene in his mind as people were jeering him and spitting at him. Hopelessness swallowed him up. Then out of nowhere, a young girl appeared with a peach. A bright, beautiful, luminous peach. Now, he hadn't seen a peach for a long time. That was back in the day when fruit was only eaten in season. Some of you may remember that. Right. Certainly not during a war. Anyway, the young girl, she reached up and she pressed the peach into his hand. A radiant orb in a dark world at a dark moment in time. And then she disappeared into the crowd. And he took that peach, and it changed everything. Not because his stomach was filled, but because he could feel hope for the future tugging upon his heart. And courage flooded through him, and he knew he would be all right because the bad thing was not going to be the last thing. And for the rest of his life, he told that story. For the rest of his life, he said that whenever he came to a fork in the road, or he had a difficult time, or he was in pain or suffering, he remembered that peach. Hope entered the present moment because of the courage of that little girl. With a peach pressed into his hand, she confronted Mussolini's bad idea. And we are capable of doing that as well. Courage to live into a better option. By little moments of defiance, where love illuminates the darkness, where something as precious as a peach changes the course of another person's life. Not because of the intent, but because of the courage it required to push back against a bad idea. That is what we are made for, you and I. We're made for hope. We know this because we all started out as little beacons of hope, sitting on somebody's lap in a rocking chair. Since then, if you're like me, there's been hills and valleys, curves and sharp corners, precipices and dark forests to walk through. But take heart, have courage, push back against a bad plan. Be a person who knows for certain that the bad thing is never the last thing. Live that resurrection reality. God is with you. Be a person of courage. Do something courageous. I don't know what it is. It might seem small to you, but do something courageous. Empty your pockets into the hands of somebody sitting on a street corner. Maybe protest an injustice. Say hello to somebody that you see coming towards you on the street at night. Be wildly generous. Do it anonymously. Give someone your peach, especially if war is raging around you. Feel the tug of hope upon your heart, because that is what the world needs from us right now. Right? To be people of hope, who act with courage, who see life as it can be, as it should be, as God designed it to be. That's your destiny, because God has hope in you revealed in your birth. So let that hope be illuminated by the resurrection of Jesus, whose birth we remember this evening.